Welcome to DIYEasyCrafts.com. Today we're going to take a look at how to sharpen a knife using a 2x72 belt grinder. In this particular show we're going to actually sharpen two different knives. I'll show you how sharp they get at the end of each sharpening project. It's a very easy process. Within about 5 minutes per knife, you'll be able to get the blade really to the point where it's razor shaving sharp. Now the first knife we're going to sharpen is a little EDC. This is an AEBL stainless steel knife, full blade etching that I was playing around with. And you have to forgive me a little bit. I didn't go out and film a show on how to sharpen a knife. I'm basically just put this together with some footage from the last couple of builds that I had done. But I think you'll get the gist of it. So it's a three-step process. I'm using an Oregon blade maker 2x72 grinder. What I have on as the first belt is about a 220 grit. Anywhere in that range would be fine. This particular knife is completely dull, has never had a micro edge on it. And the first step is just to start to establish that micro edge. You want to go in at about 20-25 degrees. When you're grinding bevels, it's all about time, pressure, and speed. I've slowed down the grinder probably at about 30%. I'm not applying a lot of pressure, and I'm being very slow. So the slower you go with the machine, the slower you go yourself, you're less likely to make mistakes, unrepairable mistakes. All I'm trying to do is establish a burr. I'm doing this edge down, so the belt is moving away from the blade, and I'm establishing that micro bevel on both sides until I can feel a burr with my fingernail along the entire edge of the blade. So if I don't feel that burr along the entire edge, I'll go back and make another pass. Usually it takes 3 or 4 passes. And that's all you need to do with that particular belt. So that's the 220 grit. The second out of the three-step process is going to be to move to a 400 grit. Now again, I'm really just showing you the way that I sharpen my knives. I'm not saying it's the best way. I'm not telling you how to do, if you've got a better way of sharpening knives, good for you. All I'm doing is showing you how I sharpen my knives. So with the 400 grit, I'm going to slow down the grinder even more, and I'm going to use even less pressure. I'm going to try to follow that same angle on that micro bevel that I established with the 220 grit. And I'm going to look for the exact same thing. I'm going to look for a burr on the back side of the knife. A burr that I can feel with my fingernails, so my fingernail will actually get hung up on. And I want to stay on that 400 grit belt until I can feel that burr along the entire length of the blade. Once I do, I'll go to the other side, and I'll do the exact same thing on the other side. Most times, once I establish the burr in both directions, I'll then go back and flip that burr one more time in both directions at a lighter pressure. And really, establishing that burr and flipping the burr is really the key to getting these knives, razor sharp. Tested. Now I've got a burr along the entire length. I'm going to turn off the belt grinder one more time, and this time I'm going to put a leather stroping belt on. It's just a 2x72 leather belt. This first knife that I'm working on was actually hollow ground, also using a 10-inch wheel, also from Oregon Blade Maker. Now, a lot of people will run this belt at a slow speed. I don't. I just work it along the flat platen, and I make 3 or 4 upward passes at a slightly greater angle than that micro bevel. And again, I'm just trying to either polish that micro bevel or once again flip that burr. And that's it. 3 easy steps, and you end up with a knife that is razor sharp. Very easily cuts through paper. And also very easily can shave the hair. In this case, it's a few spots that still have hair on it on my arm. I've been doing a decent amount of knife sharpening lately. So, and all this was done in approximately 5 minutes. 4 to 6 minutes, we'll call it. The next knife is a chef's knife. So it's substantially larger. This is about an overall 12-inch overall length. This is also AEBL stainless, but the material really doesn't matter. The sharpening process is going to remain the same. So I'm going to go back to that 220 grit belt. This knife has just been made. I just added and finished off the handles. It's completely dull. Does not have that micro bevel established. So I'm going to hold the knife at approximately 20 degrees, and I'm going to start to establish that micro bevel. And again, the belt is slowed down to about 30%. I'm not using a tremendous amount of pressure, and I'm just moving that blade slowly, trying to keep it at that same consistent angle. It just takes a little bit of practice. You have to do it a few times to get it right. So just to run through the steps while we're watching this, it's a 3-step process. We're going to use a 200 or approximately a 220 grit belt. For the first step, we're going to use a 400 grit belt for the second step, and a leather stroping belt for the final step. Step 1 and 2, we're going to establish a burr on the back side of the blade, a burr that can be felt with your fingernail, and that burr has to be consistent. You can't have one spot that doesn't have a burr. It has to be consistent along the entire length of the blade. My micro bevel on this blade is done on one side, pretty even, consistent, and now I'm going to work on the other side. I'm just going to go stand on the other side of the belt sander and do the exact same thing, but left-handed. I like to use a light with my belt sander. It comes in very handy, even when grinding bevels, micro bevels, all sorts of work. I have kind of old eyes. I need all the extra light I can get. This particular light, I just got it on Amazon, the desktop light. But it also has a magnifying glass, which comes in really handy. Because through that, I can really see the burr. I can take a look at the consistency of that micro bevel. And it was relatively cheap. I think it was about $20 to $30. So I'm just taking my time. I've still got that 220 grit belt. Just establishing that micro bevel on the flip side of the blade. And I'm going to do the fingernail test. Good. So I've got that burr established. I'm going to flip the knife over. I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side. Just to flip that burr a couple of times. Probably should have moved the camera for this one, but like I said, I really wasn't filming a show on sharpening knives. Now the 220 grit belt is done. I'm going to put that away. I'm going to put back on the 400 grit. A lot of these belts are directional and they'll have an arrow on the back, so you just want to make sure you're putting them on the grinder in the right direction. I'm going to slow down the speed again. So on the 400 grit belt, just to recap, I'm going to go slower than I did on the 220, and I'm going to use less pressure. I'm going to hold the knife at the same angle, trying to follow that same micro bevel angle. And again, I'm going to establish a burr along the entire length of the blade. The burr will get kind of smaller and lighter with each pass. So if you're doing it right, you need less passes on the 400 grit than you will on the 220, where you're really just establishing that micro bevel from a knife that has never had an edge. Checking the burr one more time. You can flip to the other side. Now that that's established, getting my money's worth out of my magnifying glass light. One more burr check. And once I'm happy with that, we can switch belts. Now I'm going back over to the leather stroping belt, 2x72. Again, a lot of people will run this slowly. I don't. All I do is I use the flat platen to my advantage to apply a little bit of pressure, and I just drag the knife upward 2 or 3 strokes on each side, and that flips and polishes that burr nicely. Now that leather belt is dry, but in the past I had put some metal polish on it, and so it probably still has a little bit of moisture from that. And that's it. This is just a very simple, very easy way of sharpening a knife and getting really good results. These knives easily cut paper, and you can easily shave with them. And it only took 5 to 6 minutes per blade. So if you have a 2x72 grinder, I would highly recommend you playing around. Get a couple of old knives that you have and just sharpen them up. Test your skills, learn the system, learn the procedure before trying it on a new blade. And that's basically it. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, I ask that you please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this YouTube channel. By all means, check us out on the web at DIYEasyCrafts.com. I have a variety of knife making how-to videos there. And please join us on our Facebook group, Knives and Knife Making. You can post pictures of your own builds. If you're interested in any of the knives featured on this particular video, they will be available. And you can also find those links on the web. Thank you very much.